Regular meeting of the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Shannon Singleton is excused this morning. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. I would also like to remind you that in addition to the audience in this room, we have people watching and listening online, so please consider your language and comments and testimony today. Today's meeting is a hybrid board meeting. Some presenters and guests will appear in person and some will appear virtually. For those presenting virtually, please mute your mic when not speaking, and when presenting, make sure to unmute your mic and turn on your camera. For those joining us in person to provide public testimony or to present, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking so the green light is showing, and off when you've completed your remarks so the red light is showing. And for all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. May I have a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The consent calendar is approved. We'll now hear public testimony.
Opportunity for public comment on non-agenda matters. This is a time for the board to hear public testimony, not for board deliberation. When it is your turn to speak, I will call your name and unmute you or call you to the presenter's table. I will set a timer for 3 minutes when you begin speaking and announce when your time is up, at which point please wrap up your sentence. We have 5 people signed up for verbal testimony and received 24 written testimonies, which were shared with board members and staff. I'm going to call up first Sonia Miller, Matthew Cavett, Autumn Lawyer, and Melly Rose.
And good morning. You can go ahead and begin.
My name's Sonia Miller, and I'm a retired program manager for school-based mental health and the ESA program. So I worked for the county for 16 years and retired in 2018. Interestingly enough, when I started in 2002, school-based mental health was on the cuttings at that time for budget purposes. Good morning, commissioners. I sent each of you an email dated March 11th stating some of the rationale for why school-based mental health is a really important preventative service by the county and saves us money in the long run. Just some quick statistics. 1 in 4 females, we're talking about people under 18, consider suicide. 1 in 8 females actually attempt. 1 in 7 males consider suicide. 1 in 14 males attempt. The rate of suicides has increased the most in Blacks and Latinos. Males are more likely to choose lethal means, so more likely to die. Ask yourselves, who is likely to seek help and who is likely to have access to help? Is there availability? The challenges to access to mental health services in Oregon is well documented and well publicized. I believe we're 46th in the rank of all 50 states in terms of access. Coupled with the current administration's cuts of $1 billion in federal grants to schools for school-based mental health and cuts to Medicaid eligibility and funding, cutting school-based compounds the access issues. At least 4 districts have found school-based mental health so valuable that they have contributed to the costs for a couple decades. Even with all the challenges in school funding, several have been long-term partners. Multnomah County School-Based Health provides flexible, culturally and linguistically responsive services, often in neighborhoods where there is not another mental health provider for miles that serves families who have OHP. Consider the transportation barriers and time missed at school and from work when a child is needing services and is taken out of school, sometimes transported by bus, in order to get to an appointment. That leads to at least 4 to a whole day of school missed. When I was supervising, one case continues to come to mind. A youngster, about 8 or 9 years old, had experienced the sudden death of his mother due to a bus accident, and so was referred to services in the school.
You can go ahead and finish your sentence or finish your remarks.
Oh, okay. At any rate, his father then subsequently also died, and the school mental health counselor was able to work with the principal before he was taken to extended family, and he was able to say goodbye because he hadn't been able to say goodbye to his mother and his father.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know you've sent us remarks, but if you have any others that you haven't sent us, you can provide them to the clerk, and she'll make sure they get out. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Is my mic on? Can you hear me now? Okay. So from the sounds of that buzzer, I got to talk fast. My name is Matthew Cavett. I am a case manager for the Peer Company. I work with the houseless out in Multnomah County. I was also houseless. I just got out of prison a little over 3 years ago. But I wouldn't be here today. I want to speak about the absolute necessity for sober living. It's helped me immensely. It helped me get on my feet, helped me pay, the structure and the accountability to actually live. I've got over 17 years inside, incarcerated. So getting out, I didn't even know how to act, but I received the OHSU housing voucher when I got out, and started working, and then started getting into the mental health and addiction side of thing and getting certified and everything. But I wouldn't be here without sober living. Sober living is where it starts, right? Even today, with the peers I encounter out in the field, I encourage them and have the most success getting them into sober living before like rapid rehousing or anything like that, because they don't know how to live inside. You have to give them that structure, the accountability, the steps. There's certain steps they have to take before they can know how to function right, going inside. And I think sober living plays a huge role in that. I'm still green, but I'm done.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Good morning.
Good morning.
And then you can hit the button at the bottom. There you go.
Good morning, Honorable Board of Commissioners. My name is Autumn Lawyer. I'm from northern Idaho, and I'm a member of the Nez Perce tribe. I came to Portland because of legal issues tied to my addiction. At the time, I did not want treatment. I didn't want sober housing. Honestly, I wanted to just do jail time and be done with it. But someone pushed me to try something different to get help. Today, I'm proud to say that this Sunday I will have 8 months clean. My sobriety date is July 22nd, 2025. Today, my life is built on willingness, honesty, accountability, and sobriety, and today I love my life. Sober living gave me that chance. It gave me stability when I was afraid of being homeless. It removed me from chaos and gave me structure, safety, and peace, things I had never had before. It gave me the ability to truly commit to my recovery. Community has become my foundation. It helped me understand who I am today, and it is who I want to be. Today, I help others find resources. I no longer feel alone. I have support. I have people who care about me. And my culture is my spiritual foundation. Coming back to my identity as a Nez Perce woman has been deeply healing, whether it's been beading, attending Sweat Lodge, or singing, and reconnecting with those parts of myself, and has strengthened my recovery in ways I can't fully explain. My goals today are simple but meaningful. I want to provide a home for my children. I want to give back to my tribe and my elders. I've always loved fishing. I've always dreamed about starting my own fishing business. But most importantly, I want to help others, especially youth, so they don't go down a path I did. I want to be a mentor, then a counselor. I want to work with the youth in recovery. That's why funding for sober housing matters so much, because without it, people like me are left with very real fear that we'll end up back on the street, alone, abandoned, back in a survivor mode, back in trauma, back in cycles of crime and addiction. I used to believe that no one was going to help me, but someone told me to call West Coast Sober Housing, and when I did, Isaac picked me up himself. And when I walked through those doors, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt at home. The women there were welcoming me. Yes, it's sober living, but it's more than that. It's a home. We cook together, we laugh together, we support each other. It's not an institution, it's a place where people rebuild their lives. I get to see other women doing good things, working, healing, and growing, and that inspires me every single day. Sober housing creates that foundation. It helps people move out of homelessness and poverty. It removes us from harmful environments and helps us at real chances and change. I didn't want this at first, but now I do. And I know there are so many others out there just like me, some who want it and some who don't know yet, but still deserve the chance. We need funding for sober housing because it saves lives, because it gives people hope, and because it gives people like me a real opportunity to come home to ourselves, to our communities, and to our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, chairs and commissioner. My name is Melly Rose. I am the Deputy Director of Iron Tribe Network, a peer-run nonprofit recovery housing organization serving parents and children rebuilding their lives after addiction. Iron Tribe Network operates 38 NAR-accredited recovery homes across Oregon, including 11 here in Multnomah County. I also serve as president of the Oregon-affiliated National Alliance for Recovery Residents, NAR. Every day we see the same challenge. People complete treatment, they're motivated, they're doing the hard work of recovery, but often they leave treatment with nowhere safe to live that supports that recovery. Without stable housing, people are frequently forced back into environments where substance use, homelessness, or instability are present. That dramatically increases the risk of relapse. Recovery housing fills that gap. It provides stable, sober, community-based housing with accountability, peer support, and structure during the most vulnerable period after treatment. And we know that stability works. In my own organization, my program outcomes show that when someone is able to remain in recovery housing for 6 months to a year, they have a 77% chance of maintaining that recovery. I mean, that's a huge number. Housing stability during early recovery period is one of the strongest predictors of long-term success. That's why I'm here today to support Commissioner Moyer's recovery housing voucher pilot proposal, which dedicates $1.8 million to recovery housing vouchers, prioritizing families and community members in safe substance use disorder supportive housing. Recovery housing is one of the most cost-effective tools we have because it connects housing, behavioral health, reentry, and family stability all in one solution. One of the most important parts of this proposal is it serves families with children. At Iron Tribe Network, we see parents rebuilding their lives while living in recovery housing with their children. When that happens, we're not just helping one person recover, we're helping break the cycles of homelessness, incarceration, child welfare involvement, and addiction. Recovery housing gives families the stability they need to move forward and to gain employment, permanent housing, and long-term recovery. Recovery housing works. It saves public resources, and most importantly, it helps people rebuild their lives. I strongly encourage you to support Commissioner Moyer's recovery housing voucher pilot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Frank Pellegrino and Lightning.
Hello? I'm on?
Welcome. Yeah, go ahead and begin.
Okay, I just thought I'd come down and get an update, and let's see, Heather's supposed to call me later and about my complaints against Multnomah County, Do Good, Multnomah. They take care of the homeless, nice facilities and everything. I'm glad, you know, that opportunity exists, but the managements of these places, I think they should be looked into and improved somehow. Anyways, let's see, last week, I guess I was, said I got my bag stolen of all my best stuff, 3 big bags, and it was one of the employees. And anyways, in order to progress this situation, I want to, what do you call it? Make let's see, last week I said I would be willing to make a settlement for $1,000 before I end up having to file a complaint with the court. And so I appreciate, you know, the facilities and the people that, you know, finance it and everything. It's just, and they're nice facilities, but there's a lot of stuff that they just doesn't make any sense what they're doing. You know, I could go into detail, but I know I only have 3 minutes. And, well, I guess that's about it for now. I just thought I'd let you know that I would come down and
Thank you for being here, and I know that Heather's going to be talking with you later.
What's that?
Heather will be talking with you later. So.
Oh, good, okay,
Yeah.
thanks, yeah. All right, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Abundance for All the People, Pegasus Lab. One of the things I was a little upset about was my good friend, President Lynn Peterson, resigning from Metro. Now, that kind of caught me off guard. And now going to Lake Oswego. I don't know if that caught any of you off guard, but I'm sure it did. She's always been a very professional individual and very respectful to the community members. And so that's a big loss for Metro that she ended up going to Lake Oswego. Now, getting back to my favorite topic, your favorite president, Donald J. Trump. Now, in my opinion, I've heard through some rumors, and I have some people that are actually affiliated all the way to DC who relay certain things back, and it's my understanding that Trumps are planning on putting their name on the Moda Center. They want Trump Moda Center, big gold letters. Now, you may laugh at that and go, well, are they able to do that? Well, if they had a friend out of Texas and some friends out of Texas, they could probably negotiate that within the lease that you're trying to get, that 20-year lease on the Moda Center. But he wants his name in big bold letters, Trump, and then Moda Center. So every time Senator Wyden walks in, he can look up and go, Trump, Trump. And Adam Silver can say the same thing. Now, there's another thing that you have to understand about why they'll move the whole Trailblazers out of Portland if they don't get that. Don Jr. and Eric Jr. are working on a business venture that requires that name on that building, whether it's in Portland, whether it's in other arenas. They are focusing on the sports and entertainment venues. And there's a big reason why they're focusing on that with some large AI companies and some big investors. And that's why Marion Allison is also a purchaser and a governor now of an NBA team. And they have a focus to get in there, and they want Trump's name on every arena, upon every NBA franchise, which is 30. And they have another reason for doing that, because they're going to increase the values of these franchises probably by a minimum of $2 billion up to $10 billion each. Adam Silver is very interested in making sure President Trump is taken care of, or the Blazers will be moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for public testimony. We will now move to R1. R1, Supportive Housing Services, FY25 Regional Annual Report.
It is not a voting item, so, but appreciate you being on the ball there. Yeah, just making sure. Do we have Metro here yet? Oh, okay. Metro is not here yet. So is there any objection to moving to R2? Do we? John's ready to go. John's ready to go. I love go transportation. So can we go ahead and move on to R2?
R2, resolution scheduling a public hearing and directing notice thereof for the consideration of the legalization of a portion of Northwest Kaiser Road, County Road number 107.
Commissioner Jones-Dickson? All right. Commissioner Jones-Dickson moves, Commissioner Moyer seconds, approval of R2. Good morning. Really excited to have you here to talk about this.
I'm very glad that you're excited about this. This is very technical. Good morning, Chair Vega-Peterson, Commissioners. My name's John Henriksen. I'm the Transportation Division Director and the County Engineer in the Department of Community Services. I'm here this morning for the second step of a three-part process to legalize a portion of Northwest Kaiser Road. Next slide, please. I'm going to remind you all of what legalization is, the process to complete legalization of a road, and explain why we need to legalize this particular portion of Northwest Kaiser Road. Next slide. ORS 368-201 provides a state law. It's a state law that provides a basis for legalization of a road if the county finds that the road is not in the right place. When county records say that the road is inaccurate or the records are lost, legalization can fix that process. In our case, if the road is traveled and used for 10 years or more, does not conform to the location of a road described in the county records, then we go through this process to correct that. Next slide, please. So legalization of a road is completed through 3 separate resolutions that are adopted by the county board. The first resolution initiates the proceedings and directs the county surveyor to survey the road as it sits today, and then produce a report showing where the road's located versus where the county records show that it is. The county engineer then delivers the report to the board and requests that the board set a public hearing date to determine if legalization is a good idea. The first resolution for Northwest Kaiser Road was passed when I came before the board on August 21st, 2025. The second resolution sets the public hearing and directs the county surveyor to notify property owners adjacent to the segment of road that is proposed for legalization. And at the public hearing, if the board determines it's appropriate, the third resolution is passed legalizing the segment of the road in question. Today we're at the second step of the process. The county surveyor has done their survey, and I am here providing the report. As part of the APR submission for today's presentation. Next slide, please. So if you look on this slide, it's kind of hard to see because it's a long segment of road, but Northwest Kaiser Road is represented by 2 sets of lines. The solid lines show where it is today, and the dotted lines show where our records say that it is. If we go through this process and complete it, we will align those 2 things so that they are no longer misaligned. Next slide, please. Finally, I'm asking the board today to approve a resolution setting a public hearing date of April 30th, 2026 at 9:30 a.m. in the county boardroom to consider the matter of legalizing a segment of Northwest Kaiser Road. The county surveyor will then notify all the abutting property owners along the road of the hearing and their opportunity to provide input on the matter if they would like to do that. That's all I have for you today. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate you being here. Do we have any public testimony on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board on this item? Commissioner Moyer.
With the appropriately aligning with the reality of where the road is, in what way does this impact easements or any existing structure in an easement? Is there any of that we should be worried about?
In this case, it doesn't impact any existing structures. It will impact the description of the properties along the road. That's why we notify all the property owners. But generally, people use the property as they see it in front of us. So the road is where it is today. And this will just correct the descriptions of their property. But it won't have a significant financial or monetary impact on any of the property owners.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Questions, Commissioner Brehm-Edwards? Okay, thank you so much, John. We are looking forward to the exciting conclusion of this action, and good luck with the board, with the public hearing. All right, can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Moyer,
Yes?
Commissioner Brehm-Edwards,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones-Dickson,
Yes.
Chair Vega-Peterson.
Yes, the resolution is adopted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Do we have the folks here who are able to present on R1? Okay, great. Can we go back to R1, Emily?
R1, Supportive Housing Services, FY25 Regional Annual Report.
All right. So I appreciate folks coming over from Metro today, as well as the co-chairs of the Oversight Committee. Really glad to have you here, and it's great to see you. This is the Metro-wide Annual Supportive Housing Services Report for fiscal year 2025, so we're looking back a little bit. I know that putting this together requires a lot of work for our Homeless Services Department, other counties, and everyone at Metro, so thank you all for doing that. So really, we know what an important resource the SHS measure is for our community, and so we're really looking forward to hearing this report today. So Yesenia, it's great to see you, and I will turn it over to you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Great. Good morning again, Chair and Commissioners. It's great to see you all. For the record, my name is Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director with Metro. And I am joined today with Mike Savara, who's the co-chair of the Oversight Committee, and Jeremiah Rigsby, who's a member of the Oversight Committee. And we are pleased to bring you today an update on the 4th Annual Regional Report that covers SHS implementation for the period between July 2024 and June 2025. As you all know, voters of the Metro region approved a historic measure to establish a regional system of care in partnership with Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. And one of these requirements of SHS is that each county submits what we call an annual report every year by October 31st that shows how SHS funds were spent in the previous year in alignment with SHS requirements, goals, and commitments. This report gets submitted to Metro and the Regional Oversight Committee, and they analyze that, and then they create their own regional report that really compiles these 3 county annual reports to assess performance of the previous year. And then this report also discusses, where we're at in terms of the regional picture that we're trying to build with our regional goals and commitments, and addresses any challenges and opportunities that we have moving forward. And they also provide recommendations in this regional report on how to strengthen SHS for in the future. So that's what we're here to present to you all today. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we'll talk a little bit about the supportive housing services overview, the main goals that the Oversight Committee was really measuring against when they were reviewing these reports. We'll also talk about progress and highlights of the previous year. And then the committee members will round out the presentation with providing an overview of recommendations that they have for SHS. And I will just note that this regional report was drafted in context of our Metro Council discussing and then finalizing some SHS reforms to the system, one of which included to streamline our 2 governance bodies of the Tri-County Planning Body and the Oversight Committee. So they took that into consideration as they were drafting this report and these recommendations. So you'll see that their recommendations are really targeted towards this next season of governance for SHS as the Regional Policy and Oversight Committee stands up, and to Metro Council as they're thinking about how do you reform and continue to streamline and make SHS better as a system to have more better and lasting outcomes for people experiencing homelessness. If we go to the next slide, this is the SHS regional goals that I was mentioning. This is really the cornerstone 10-year goals that we had that the Oversight Committee was looking at as we were assessing performance and challenges and opportunities up against these regional goals, which is really to reduce barriers to housing stability for communities of color, to connect at least 5,000 households experiencing homelessness to permanent supportive housing. This is otherwise known as Population A, which is a strong focus of this measure. And then additionally, to stabilize at least 10,000 households at risk or experiencing homelessness in permanent housing. And via the SHS 2020 work plan that serves as the implementation guidance document for SHS, we also have what we call these SHS regional outcome metrics that really provide additional goals and metrics in terms of how SHS is doing in different areas like housing stability, engagement and decision making, that they will be discussing a little bit more progress towards each of those and where we're at. So with that, I'll pass it over to our Oversight Committee members. Really want to thank them for their service and all their hard hours on the Oversight Committee. But also thank you, Chair Vega-Peterson, for your commitment and service on the Oversight Committee, as well as Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you so much, and good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be with you all. Again, for the record, my name is Mike Savara, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee. If we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to just kind of cover a few of the key highlights before we dive into some of the details. So fiscal year 25 was obviously a big year for the Supportive Housing Services measure in a lot of ways. In some ways, we really saw the leveling out of the system and also a real reckoning with how the system had been built and how much resource we have to be able to work with overall in the long term. So just by the numbers, counties overall contracted with 107 different service providers, including 16 culturally specific organizations, totaling $44.4 million to the culturally specific organizations, which is a 477% increase. So I think just the depth of investment in communities that have the real expertise in serving communities that are most impacted by housing instability and homelessness is really showing in some of those resource allocations. We also saw really a more of a build out in some of the kind of strategic regional work that had been happening. The Tri-County Planning Body, really with the counties and other partners, had been developing and continuing to implement key aspects. So think things like training and technical assistance, landlord recruitment, data sharing and performance. We accomplished a lot of the kind of big tasks that aren't even related to directly serving clients, but allow us to better link those systems and better serve communities. I think another aspect is just the spending. I think that this board knows well the county SHS spending in year 4 totaled the most it's ever been, $424.9 million. It's a 44% increase from the prior year. So again, think of that leveling off as this year, now really a reckoning with, we have lower than expected anticipated revenue in the next few years. We're gonna have to really grapple with some hard decisions about priorities. And so we see that come up in some of our recommendations and some of the things that we're thinking about in the future. If we can go to the next slide, we'll dive into a little bit of the regional look at performance to goals. So this is a slide that really looks at the overall regional view of how we did in terms of setting goals and then pursuing and achieving those goals. And you'll see that largely the goals are in the light green and the achieved numbers are in the blue. Largely we achieved the goals that we had set out as a region to pursue. I think one thing we'll note here is the supporting housing services units brought into operation. We did not reach that goal as a region. Some of the individual counties did reach their goals, but part of that is the strategy for the change. In the fall of this fiscal year, we got a new revenue forecast from Metro, and counties had to make some quick, hard decisions about whether or not to bring online certain units that they had planned. And so really, I think I see this as a strategic decision in light of circumstances in some ways, rather than a failure to meet a goal in some ways. We're really serving more people than we've ever been able to in the past with this measure, both from the perspective of the individuals served, but also in terms of the retention and performance. You can see we're able to retain 92% of folks that are placed in permanent supportive housing, which is honestly above where national standards typically place permanent supportive housing. I think it's important to note just the rising acuity levels of the population that we're serving in permanent supportive housing in the region, the continued need for integrated health services, and sort of really being able to provide that level of a performance as a system is an impressive feat. Our providers have really stepped up and shown that they can serve and support and be flexible where needed with those clients that they're working with. So I think this is really, a monumental year in some ways. It's the first time we've really achieved all of the regional goals that we sort of set out and said we were going to. So I think this is really going to be one of those tensions you'll see us talk about later about the performance of the system, the utility and the benefits that we're seeing offered to so many folks. Squared with the reality that people see outside their door every day, and the reality that there's so many more folks that are experiencing homelessness in our community that we need to be able to support and we need to find pathways for. And so the tension between a system that is doing what it's intended and designed to do with the reality that it's not scaled to be able to support the breadth of need because of how many other factors are driving the rate of homelessness in our communities. So we'll get into more of that in a bit, but I think it's just kind of an important note that really the regional performance is really trending well, and we're excited to see this system really in full-fledged. If we can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more, diving in on some key metrics around housing stability and really breaking this data out from a disaggregated viewpoint around race and ethnicity. So this is a really key aspect of the supportive housing services measure. We know that homelessness doesn't affect everybody in the same way, that especially even nationally, that there are really key trends that people of color continue to see higher rates of homelessness across the country and in our community as a result of systemic factors such as systemic racism, access to opportunities, access to resources. We really want to make sure that as we're thinking about whether or not the system is working, that it's working for those that it has not worked in the past, and that we're seeing access and results for people who have historically not had the same access. And so you can see here on the slide that people of color, in terms of their comparison from the point-in-time count, which is inherently a flawed tool for understanding whether or not a population is experiencing homelessness, but it often is the only tool that is consistent and reliable across many different communities that we use. The year 4 placement for housing, for shelter, for prevention exceeded that for the communities of color in the point-in-time count, which is, again, just a nod that we're serving people of color that have historically not had access to some of the services and resources at a higher rate than they're appearing in the point-in-time count. It doesn't mean we're ending racism or solving some of these big gaps and disparities, but it's a trend that we like to see in terms of whether or not we're moving the needle on the overall picture of disparities. So this is an important marker. It's not a full, kind of analysis of the overall piece, but I think it's an important kind of signpost for us as we're kind of thinking about where do we invest, where do we continue to see more need and more communities that have different capacities for being able to access some of those services in the ways that are most meaningful for them. If we go to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the equitable service delivery models. I mentioned before in kind of the opening that we saw a rise in the number of culturally specific providers, but also in the number of dollars invested in those organizations over the past few years. So you can see, where we started from each community. We had different baselines, obviously, in terms of experience and breadth of relationship with culturally specific organizations. But really, as we've seen, because, again, this is a performance expectation, this is something we track as an oversight body, the counties have, largely continued to meet the moment and are serving and supporting communities of color through culturally specific organizations at higher rates than in the past. So this is a good trend in terms of, again, trying to think about how we build an equitable system that supports everyone and has the unique and varied services that are needed by different communities. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more. Another aspect that we look at in terms of how are the systems functioning is how decisions are being made and also how advice is being generated and by whom that advice is being generated. So one of the requirements of the measure is that there is a strong engagement and decision-making bodies that's set up across every county level. And you can see here different advisory bodies, lived experience advisory committees, or advisory committees broadly. They have different representation. These are self-identified sort of reports from people that are on those bodies about people of color or lived experience of homelessness. And this is a really important piece because, again, if we want to center solutions that really work for folks, we need to be able to get advice and wisdom and expertise from people that have lived it, that know the challenges and struggles of communities. So this is an important metric for us to kind of track and understand how communities are doing in terms of being able to access and participate in the process of delivering the system. So again, really excited to see strong lived experience integration into all 3 of the counties, as well as good representation of people of color. Again, we could dive deeper into some of this to make sure that we're thinking about other perspectives and experiences to make sure that we're continuing to get diverse experience from a community as we're building out these systems. I'm going to pass to Jeremiah, who's going to dive into some more of the metrics.
Good morning. My name is Jeremiah Rigsby. I am the Chief Legal and Public Affairs Officer for an organization called Care Oregon. We have about 500,000 people on the Oregon Health Plan, and I've been a committee member for the Oversight Committee since its inception. So happy to see you all, happy to be here and talk a little bit about some things with less narrative, the money, the spending, the numbers. So starting with what's happened here in year 4, county spending in year 4 totaled about $424.9 million. This represents a 44% increase in spending compared to previous years, and an 185% increase in spending compared to year 2. So definitely seeing a ramp up in getting these funds out the door and into communities that need them. I would note that it looks as though county priorities have changed a bit, and the demand for these services is outpacing the forecasted tax revenue. So we're seeing a shift in prioritizing what the community and what our people are using most as far as the services provided. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about tax collection. The year 4 supportive housing services gross tax collections were $325 million after I believe some fees and administrative costs. That leaves the counties with about $299.3 million to spend. In accordance with the distribution formula, 45.3% of that funding goes to Multnomah County, 33.3% goes to Washington County, and 21.3% would go to Clackamas County. Regarding county spending, again, the year 4 money available to the county is about $300 million. Counties also have money, as you all know, that is carried over from previous years. And for year 4, with money carrying over, I believe the total amount of money available is about $687 million. Multnomah County has other revenue, specifically $15 million in one-time funds from the administrative budget of Metro's SHS program, which were allocated to emergency shelters here in Portland. The county's total spending represents about 142% of tax revenue and 62% of total resources. But there is a little bit of variation with how much the counties are spending, with Multnomah County spending about 78% of the total resources, and on the other side, Clackamas County spending roughly around 42% of total resources. The spending by category is really focused heavily on permanent supportive housing, with about $122.6 million of funding going towards that. Second is safety on and off the streets, with about $116.8 million going to that. The third largest category is around system supports. There's about $67 million that were put into provider capacity building infrastructure, and keeping the network of folks actually doing this work stable and supporting the mission. I want to talk a little bit about administrative rates. The Oversight Committee is charged with making sure the administrative rates that providers are taking are kind of falling within a certain range. About 78% of our providers have an administrative rate around 15% or so. And the majority, obviously, of this is within the range that we were monitoring for. There's a few providers that have negotiated county-approved rates, and then you have some organizations that have higher administrative rates due to federally negotiated situations, but majority of providers are around 15% administrative rate. Finally, talking about county performance and Multnomah County specifically, Multnomah County exceeded all regional housing metric goals. There's an exception in the supportive housing units brought into operation, and I believe that is because of delays in construction and construction costs. All the other goals have been met. 41% of its supportive housing units goal, that the delay in caused by construction delays meant that 200 new permanent supportive housing units were paused in that space. But the county exceeded goals for outreach, resource navigation, employment engagement, and placements in permanent housing programs. So with that, I think I will send it back to Mike.
Great, thanks, Jeremiah. So I think we're going to go to the next slide. So we're going to kind of move on from some of the data and some of the analysis and talk a little bit more about some of the challenges and some of our recommendations as a committee. So I think none of these challenges that we'll talk about are going to be a surprise. They're really important to name, in terms of context for where we're at as a community. as I mentioned before, the systemic factors that are driving homelessness in our region are really important to understand and continue to address from a broader perspective. Some of the underlying factors that actually cause homelessness, including lack of housing, is just the fact that people can't afford to live. Rising costs for childcare, incomes that just don't enable people to meet their needs. The lack of childcare that's safe and accessible as well. Inadequate resources for mental health is often a challenge too, making sure that we have a responsive system for folks. These are things that are driving the overall rate of homelessness. The inability to access safe and stable housing is something that really we see across the nation. When that is a huge factor in a community, we see rising rates of homelessness every time. And so these are the things that are driving the situation that we're seeing, and a lot of them are outside the direct purview of the Supportive Housing Services measure. It was never intended to address the broad sweep of challenges across society for folks. And yet it's also tasked with supporting people who are most vulnerable, who are sort of the consequence, experiencing the consequences of all of these systemic factors. And so that's, again, that tension that we really have to think about. How do we address those larger systemic factors, acknowledge that they're really driving the force behind this, but then also roll up our sleeves and do the work that we know we need to do as a community around supporting people that have sort of fallen out the bottom of the system. I think another piece of this is just that growing need. We've seen, especially after the pandemic, I always forget that the measure was launched really during the pandemic, and so we see both the pandemic response, the weight of that on community, on providers, on the system, but also building out this system at the same time and simultaneously. And now we look at this growing need, and some of the data that we've seen as a result of being able to better understand inflow and outflow of the system is that for every 10 people who exited the region's system, so exited to permanent housing, we saw on average 30 new people enter the system. And so that inflow and outflow balance is really the challenge that we have to wrestle with as a community. How do we continue to address those folks that are most in need and identify the folks that are most likely to end up in the homeless services system, in a shelter, on the streets, and trying to intervene earlier and use prevention strategies to identify and secure those folks with resources. That really is the challenge of trying to understand the inflow and outflow and then trying to address the rate of people coming in. I think the state of Oregon saw some of the highest rates of eviction in January that we've ever seen, according to some of the data from Portland State University. And that's really driving not every eviction results in homelessness, but every eviction results in displacement, in trauma, in challenges in trying to find stability and trying to keep kids in school, all of the impacts from those consequences. So being able to really understand that growing need and the context of where we're at is really important, both from a public messaging perspective, but also just from what do we do as policymakers to make the right decisions about investing our resources that we do have into some of these. And that leads me to the last piece, obviously, the resource constraints. This is not just supportive housing services. We're seeing this at every level of government. There are structural reasons for this, and there are political and policy reasons for this. And so we see the resource constraints really driving, again, hard decisions about how to make choices about investing in expensive interventions that are life-saving and needed versus trying to think about the overall picture of providing more resources for folks that maybe aren't as vulnerable or not living outside, more prevention or rehousing supports. I think these are the challenges that we have to wrestle with as both the supportive housing services forecast outlook looks, but also just in terms of where each community, each county is at in terms of their other resources, general fund, federal funds, state funds. That squeeze is getting felt everywhere, and that's where the hard decisions that I know you all have to make and have been making are real pressure. So I think with that, we'll jump into some of the recommendations from the committee for the counties and Metro to really kind of sit with. We go to the next 2 slides. We'll skip this one. Thanks. So this first one is really just we've been at this as an oversight body for I think 4 or 5 years now, 5, 6 years, I don't know, since 2021, I think. And we want the community to learn from the experience that we've had to inform the future. So being able to say, like, okay, we're doing this new policy committee to be able to restructure how we do oversight, that's great, and we're kind of moving forward with that. But we can't just forget the things and the lessons that we've learned along the way. A few of those things that I think we as a committee are really thinking about here is that at times we struggled with understanding what our role was, frankly, in terms of what genuine oversight looked like, in terms of what our authority was, in terms of how we sort of played a role in the mix. And so I think really being able to define clearly that this new body has genuine oversight, that there's delegated authority for it to make decisions and support decisions in moving forward is really important, so that we're not faced with more confusion and more lack of clarity around roles. I think another piece is just continuing to make evidence-based decisions when the challenges are so overwhelming. I think oftentimes it's really easy to make decisions that feel easier, and sometimes those can be short-sighted. They can lead to decisions that aren't actually going to make the best use of our precious public resources. And so I think those evidence-based decisions about trying to think about things like, if we want to end homelessness, we have to invest in getting people to permanent housing. We also have to invest in other strategies and supports, but really the centerpiece needs to be, how do we get people into supportive housing and services that they need, and then be able to support those in an ongoing way. I think another piece is just continuing to uplift the values that drove and continue to drive the supportive housing services measure. I think this is really important because it's easy to move off of our values when it's really hard. When it's you know, it's easy to say a word and say I value these things, or I value doing these things. It's a lot harder to do those things when you're up against so many challenges. And I think this is a moment as a community where we have to say, these are our values. We're not going to move away from those. We're not going to move away from continuing to think about things like racial equity. We're not going to move away from continuing to move about things like having a strategy and a system that supports ending homelessness rather than managing it only. So these are some of the values that we don't want to see lost in some of the change and shuffle as this new oversight committee kind of changes and the future governance moves forward. I think I'll have one more slide and then pass to Jeremiah to close this out if we can go to thanks. So this next one is really revisiting the supportive housing services investment priorities. We think, you know, we're about halfway through the measure at this point. This is a really important time for us to not just assume that everything that's been needs to continue the same way, because we're in a very different moment than we were in 2020. And I think it's important that we continue to have the right discussions about whether or not the allocations and strategies and priorities are the right strategies. The Oversight Committee did not kind of weigh in on any of these things in terms of, you know, we have perspective on this, but really what we're saying here is that it's important that we re-examine and have a discussion. And I think this is really important, that we don't think any of these things are designed to be sort of made by one body. This is really a community decision, community leaders from across jurisdictions being able to come together and have hard conversations about priorities rather than sort of going on their own or going alone. This is an important moment for us to actually come together and have really good discussion about how to move forward and where we as a region need to prioritize. So some of those things that we think are important to at least continue to dive into are whether or not the population A-B spending goals, the 75-25 split, still makes sense in context of the changing dynamics around prevention, in context of a lot of the changes just that we've seen overall and the inflow and outflow data that we've continued to see. Another one that we think is important to discuss is the prioritization of spending on kind of key program categories. So how do we think about investing in shelter versus investing in rehousing solutions? I think the shelter study that your team did recently really shined a really good light on sort of how do we make sure that we're getting the right level of outcomes out of a system that is often constrained around resources, especially for permanent housing placement. So trying to make those hard decisions about how we invest the precious resources that we do in the right categories, and how do we have a framework for doing that as a region, whether, it's definitely going to look different in each county, but what's the process that we kind of help decide as a region so that we're not having three very different experiences of how the system works in each county. Another example is, just frankly, the formulas for allocating the supportive housing services funding to counties, Metro, and the Regional Investment Fund. Obviously, this is something of discussion lately. We think it's important to continue to hash out where we're putting every dollar and how we're making sure that the dollars are lining up with our priorities. And then really just the strategic role of SHS in context of the other resources that counties have to work with every day. This includes things like Medicaid, includes things like making sure that we're thinking about whatever federal resources and constraints might come in from the federal government are sort of leveraged alongside the flexible dollars that we have as a local continuum. With that, I will pass to Jeremiah to kind of close this out, and we'll kind of dive into some questions if you have any.
Thanks, Mike. I just have two quick slides, I think, as far as recommendations go. The first is around, strengthening understanding of what's happening. I think we recognized really early on the uphill battle that communications is around this issue. There is the desire, I think, from the public, from everybody in this room, potentially to see change quickly. And a lot of these changes and a lot of the work that is happening are multi-year solutions that are going to take time to really have major visible impacts in the community, but it's still incredible work, the amount of infrastructure that has been built over the last 4 years, the amount of money that has gone out, and the real data that we have to show the impact that's having on households is very much indicative of progress. How we communicate that to the public in a landscape where there is so much happening and there's still so much work to do is an ongoing project. It's work that staff from the counties are doing with Metro to figure out what communication planning looks like in an environment that's changing, in an environment that also has a need that is far outpacing the resources that we have. I say that also in the Medicaid space, trying to implement the 1115 demonstration waiver and watching our population come through the front door of that waiver in numbers that we could have never predicted, just the need far outpacing what we have available to address it. So we know that whether it's construction, whether it's the people we have, the providers, we have work to do to make sure that we're getting the best services to this population, but we also know it's much more than we can handle, and how we communicate that is ongoing work, because there is incredible progress being made. The second thing, the second and last slide is around hoping the new governance council really builds on some of the progress we made. Mike mentioned a lot of times we really struggled to figure out what our role was in oversight. We have so much money going out the door. We have so many counties, the counties doing such good work and wanting to keep them moving in the right direction. However, counties are autonomous bodies, and so how do you make sure that things are going in the right direction, and what's our role in making sure the trains stay on the right track? I would say we're really proud of the work that has happened both from the counties and on this oversight body, and we're hoping that a lot of what we've put together over the last few years is built on in the future. So that will turn it back over to you all.
Yeah, this concludes our presentation, so we have some time for questions, and I know that there's also Moltco staff here in the room in case they want to add any more context or answer some questions.
Thank you so much. Again, really appreciate you being here for all of the work that you've done in leading the Oversight Committee. It's great, and I think some of the things that you've brought into this presentation in terms of things that we want to look at and continue to look at going forward are really important. And I know that, that you share a lot of the things that we are concerned about and interested in as a board too. So I'll go to the board for questions. We'll start with Commissioner Moyer.
Great, thank you so much. I thought you brought up some interesting points that that I'm interested in recommendations on how this new governing body could take on some of this work. One was, specifically the comment around SHS is one piece of the system, but there are actually other really important pieces that need to be in coordination and aligned, and in some cases available, in order to holistically approach this. Specifically, I think you talked about mental health services. And I have wondered the role that the Metro oversight body should be playing. One, because some of that really probably should be a regional conversation about distribution of services, but also how do we engage with our health partners on this? I assume you guys have seen the data that Multnomah County and HealthShare did to data match and what we're seeing. And so, some of my questions are around, how has Metro and the oversight bodies engaged in conversations about regionally making sure our health partners are making the right levels of service available to their covered lives? And, what level of role should this new accountability body have in advocating related to other governments' roles in making sure they're doing their part? I'm specifically thinking about an article I recently read by Dr., I think it's pronounced Zhu, Jane Zhu from OHSU, related to Medicaid access and how Portland, in fact, has one of the worst access to primary care of its Medicaid population of any major city. In fact, LA has a 97% reasonable time access, and we have a 35% reasonable access. This is her study. I'm sure there are others that might differ. And yet, we know that 50% of our shelter population who happen to be covered by HealthShare have an existing severe mental illness diagnosis. How likely are they engaged in primary care? How engaged are our partners in this? I think Jeremiah mentioned the rollout of the 1115 demonstration and it being overwhelmed. So that's one question. And what would your vision be for this advisory role in some of that coordination work?
I might start. Those are great questions and great call-outs. I think I would delineate two issues. I think there's one issue around whose role it is to help make sure the services are coordinated. How are we figuring out who's on first for which and duplication of work? There's a second issue around evaluating the quality of care and whether or not people are getting the services they need to move through the system in the right way, right? And I think both are important. I think when I think through from my experience, the work of just the timing of the SHS Oversight Committee and when it was stood up, and then subsequently where coordinated care organizations, including HealthShare, have been for the last 15 years almost, and then the waiver. I'm not saying that there was a lack of coordination as much as everyone was working to set these things up almost separate, like everyone kind of had a lane. There was so much that went into, especially for the SHS Oversight Committee's role, that goal was really around what are the counties doing, and we saw at first slow distribution of funds getting out and really working to make sure those funds were getting out. I think the setting up where CCOs are at in the 1115 demonstration waiver with how quickly we had to do it was a task that was pretty monumental, and that's on top of moving people through a pretty broken healthcare system, right? And so we're now year two, in this case with SHS, a couple years removed from establishing these sort of new things. I think there is an open question as to how we all come back together to figure out. And I think constraint on financial resources will force us into the same table to have a different type of conversation about what to do with limited money. I think everybody should be engaged in the type of care that this population is receiving, whether it's in the form of access to care, which is one thing, right? I think a separate thing is it's access to the right care at the right time. And that gets into a workforce conversation. You start talking about the people that are in shelters with SPMI or diagnosable conditions, and who do we have and what resources in the community do we have to care for those people that are moving out of controlled settings and then kind of going through a cycle. There's a lot of work to do in that space. So I think on one hand, I see the Oversight Committee, the vision for me is the future version of this Oversight Committee should start bringing into the conversation how these different parts are getting coordinated for the same population. And then I think there also needs to be it can be simultaneous, it could be in that room, but a different conversation about what we mean by access and access and service to quality care and how we do that with the resources that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brim Edwards.
Good morning. Thanks for the presentation. And Metro's assessment of what the progress last year and the recommendations. I'm curious, as you might know, Multnomah County has a dashboard that tracks inflow and outflows. When I first got on the commission, we didn't have that. It was the point-in-time count, which it always came with an asterisk, but this isn't actually an accurate count. So we, after almost 2 years, now have a dashboard that, to answer my question, are we making progress? Are we falling further behind? Are we treading water? The dashboard to date says that we haven't been making progress, just in the sense of the inflow has been greater than the outflow, as you mentioned in your testimony. And so in January of this year, which is the most recent month, we have the data. Multnomah County had 8,797 individuals who were unsheltered. We actually have made progress on more individuals at night have a safe place to sleep and basic services. However, I say we still have 8,797 individuals in January who were without shelter or basic services or safety. And I think conceptually, when voters were asked to vote on this, they were thinking that the goals that were set, which at the time it seemed like they matched the level of the crisis. What does Metro think, or this new governing, how will the new governing council wrestle with this issue that, potentially we have almost 9,000 people who are without shelter, and it could be years potentially before they have access to housing? Because it's one thing to say, hey, we met our goals in terms of the goals that were set at a different time. And yet the reality, and maybe this is the disconnect between Metro and at least people in Multnomah County, is that the reality is it actually has gotten worse. There doesn't seem to be a solution or a tool or an action that's going to be taken that will address this gap. And so I'm curious about sort of Metro's point of view on that, because I think it's hard to resell, which I think the polling showed the voters on, hey, let's re-up this because we've met our goals. But the reality is maybe the goals today are very different. And what about the 9,000 people last night, in Multnomah County who had no shelter or who are camping in neighborhoods?
start that. Yeah, I'll get that started and then invite Oversight Committee members to speak more on that. Earlier in the presentation, I referenced that our Metro Council had recently passed some reforms to SHS. I talked a little bit about the consolidation of governance, but there's another reform around updating the SHS 10-year goals and kind of where we're headed, because like you described, those goals were set in the context of 5 years ago was very different. So we are currently going through an exercise to look at, for the next 4 to 5 years, at the later half of the measure, what are the goals that we want to reorient the system towards? And instead of looking at placements, we're really looking at how we can increase the efficiency of the system and how do we ensure that we have better outcomes for people experiencing homelessness. So part of that is looking like engaging with each of the counties to better understand the landscape of where we're at today, and how do we then create new goals that are really going to orient and prioritize certain things for the next 4 to 5 years. So those are conversations that staff are starting to have. And as we move through those conversations on some of these endorsed goals that our Metro Council has already passed, we will be taking those conversations to this new Regional Policy and Oversight Committee that now kind of bridges both sides of the SHS world with policy and oversight, to kind of have some of those conversations that you're describing and that Commissioner Moyer spoke to around like healthcare and SHS being only one piece of the puzzle. And what does it look like given that we're going to have this new Policy and Oversight Committee that has representatives from healthcare, from the business side, from counties, cities, service providers, and many other lenses, to have some of these conversations around with SHS and the locus of control that SHS has, and in context of these other funding sources, where do we prioritize our efforts, and how do we ensure that we are meeting the moment with the goals that we set for the next 4 years to really ensure that SHS is being used to the best of its abilities. But would either of you add anything to that?
I think the only thing else I would add, a lot of what we've been talking about is demand side, right? We've been talking about the services that people need, paying for rent assistance. I think without a strong supply side strategy that really looks at how do we build more housing and drive down rents, we're not going to move the needle like you're talking about. So I think we could, renew SHS and continue to do that, but without more affordable housing and then more policy change in terms of how we actually think about building housing, all types of housing. We're not going to see that change. Just this morning, I think Chris Berg, who works at Metro, has posted this great article on LinkedIn that I was reading about how the city of Austin, Texas, drove down rents by adding 120,000 units of housing over the last 10 years. And like the strategies they used were not groundbreaking. They basically just made it easier to build housing. And obviously Texas is very different than Oregon, and their context is different. But the strategies of like, how do we make it easier to build? And then also, how do we think about having a thriving economy overall is really important for this discussion. Because if we don't have jobs that pay high enough wages that can afford rent, we're not going to see a change in the overall rate of people falling into homelessness. So I know that's not an easy talking point. That's not going to end up on a bumper sticker do economic justice. It's not really the slogan, I guess, but I think that's really, if we miss that part of the equation, I think we're gonna continue to struggle to answer to voters who rightly are asking, what's happening? We're investing all these resources, and I'm not seeing a change on the sidewalk in the community that I live in, and it's really those both factors need to be examined. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
So I appreciate the answers. These portions of it, the updating of the goals, I think that's really important because the community, like every morning, is thinking about things in terms of today, not the reality in 2020. And increasing the efficiency, the sort of how do we move people more rapidly from the streets, usually through shelter and into transitional housing and then ultimately into housing. And I also it would be, I appreciate the reference to both housing and also economic justice. Those are things that we've talked about, here at Multnomah County. Multnomah County doesn't have housing in its portfolio. Generally the city of Portland and Metro. And one of the things that we've talked about is, we can stand up shelter, give somebody a safe place to sleep at night, basic services, start connecting to the services, but if there's no housing to go to, then, but what happens then is people, they're pointing back to Multnomah County, is like, how come you're not moving these people into housing? So having like Metro and the cities that have this core responsibility actually have a plan that is implementable is really important, like in terms of partnerships with the counties. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and we'd love to see what that regional housing goal is and then how it's actually going to be built. I think we're looking at things with in terms of economic justice and working with the cities and, how do we increase income so that people have that ability to pay their rent. And having said all that, I will say that I don't think voters at the end of the day care about governance. I don't think it's a talking point. It's important to us as elected officials, but I don't think they care about it. I think what they care about is like what the results are. And so if the, just like changing the governance system doesn't change the results, I think there's, the public is still going to be holding all of us accountable. And I guess that would be my last thing, is just like when we think about this work and where the accountability lies, one concern I have is, like, I'm happy any day of the week to be accountable for things that I actually can make decisions about. But if Metro or an unelected body is moving into, we're going to make decisions that actually belong to people who are elected, and then pointing to Multnomah County of like, you're accountable for that, while we didn't give you the resources, or we actually took the authority to make the decisions away, I don't think it's going to be a good outcome overall for the supportive housing services, because what the public will look at is just like whether we're getting the results or not. So I would hope that as we continue this journey together, I'm just thinking about all the people who slept last night on the street, and maybe we're saying, hey, in 10 years we might have housing for you. Like, just the public's going to say that's not acceptable. So, how do we partner in the accountability for providing the housing and creating that housing that we need, that we actually have a plan to make that happen, and then holding the counties accountable for providing the services to get people into that housing. So, I think this continued partnership is like, we can't be like, hey, Metro's not doing its job, or the counties aren't doing their jobs. We all have to do it together. But I'm concerned that we don't actually have a plan or the goals to address what the public expects us. So, thank you for your continued work. Appreciate and I look forward to the continued partnership and Metro coming back maybe with the plan for where we're going to get those housing units. I'm perfectly fine stealing from Austin or anywhere else
Any
that's
good ideas?
making us happen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here this morning and for the presentation. Per usual, the information is good. Just have a couple questions and then comments as it pertains to the SHS committee. That's who all is on the body? Did you say we're on the body?
Yeah, this new Regional Policy and Oversight Committee has a representative from each of the counties. It also has representatives from cities, service providers, coalitions, CCO, housing provider, OHCS, TriMet. philanthropy. There might be another representative or two that I might be missing. I can certainly follow up via email to send you a list of all the different perspectives and lenses of this new Policy and Oversight Committee, but it's really intended to be as representative as possible of all the folks in the community working on this issue, and have a table and a space where we can all coordinate and have these discussions and make some of the decisions around housing and homelessness and how we can better resource and support the system to, again, have better lasting impacts to people experiencing homelessness.
Perfect. That gives me hope. And to build off of your point, Commissioner Brim-Edwards, I think it's incumbent on us to communicate to our representative to ensure that the needs and the goals that we're setting as a board is represented on the committee. So that was a good point. The additional comments that I'll make, I think you already mentioned it, Jeremiah, as far as the system of care, we have to build that out and be very specific. One of the things that I continue to ask is just like geographically, I think about East Multnomah County, how are the funds and what have you, and that's another thing that I'll bring up to my colleague or whoever's serving on the committee. So that, again, that's on us. We mentioned economic justice, so workforce, so providing, I'm regurgitating some of the things that you've heard already, or some of the things that you mentioned. But I think it's important to restate. So economic justice and creating the pathways as far as workforce and jobs and ensuring that folks are getting connected to care, and something that we talked about 4 years ago, Michael, when I was serving on city council in Gresham. And then lastly, just thinking through the investments that can be made that increases one's hope and dignity. I visited the Community Warehouse last week. It's an organization that's been here in the community for the last 25 years, and they were talking about simple things as far as like having couches and even just being able to connect and things like that. And those simple things help to increase one's capacity to take the next step, whether it's jobs or getting the help that you need as it pertains to mental health or just taking care of yourself in general. So we are poised and ready, and we can beat Austin here in Multnomah County and the rest of the region as we continue to build America's favorite county. So I'm extremely hopeful, and I think we're going in the right direction. And the last point is I think we should invite you to the SOCIS, the chair, as far as the other committees. I think it's important that we have that context so we're all reading from the same sheet of music. So again, thank you for just your service, your commitment, and again, hopeful.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I just, wanted to say that I think that there's been really good work that's been done so far, and that we are going to continue to do that and work together, and that partnership is going to be really important. There are these conversations that are happening at Metro in terms of governance and the move to key performance indicators, what they should be. The revisiting the SHS investment priorities, every bullet point you had on there, I was like, yes, that needs to be talked about. Yes, that needs to be talked about. One of the things that was really important to me coming in as chair is that we had in Multnomah County a body similar to what the new governance committee at Metro looks like. So that's why we created the homeless response system that really is about the county, but also the city of Portland. We have a representative from East County, the mayor of Gresham. We have business community. We have a mental health subject matter expert. We have Home Forward on there. We have Health Share on there. We have community members on there. We have a separate implementation committee who are the people at the staff level who are doing this work every day. And then we've got a community advisory table. And all of that working together has really helped us as we've been moving forward updates to the work and the goals that we have here in Multnomah County, the Homeless Response Action Plan, which was approved by both this body and City Council just at the end of last year. And so we've really tried to be super clear about both where we want to go, what needs to happen, what we want this work to look like that works for all of the partners at the table, but also understanding what it's going to take to get there. And so as we're having these, our budget conversations, we're having that. And so I'm looking forward to that same type of conversation and work happening at the Metro level in partnership. I know that there were concerns, like we as a county had some concerns about the makeup of the current body, in that the counties who are ultimately responsible for doing this work, who are the ones who are, making these decisions and hold the responsibility, are actually outnumbered by the number of cities on the committee. And so really thinking about how that dynamic is going to work. But that being said, I know that there was a recent resolution that Metro was working on where we had some feedback about, the regional investment funds, for instance, and that there was some good communication back and forth, and there were some amendments that I think reflected not just Multnomah County's, but also Clackamas and Washington County's perspective. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that we've had with Metro counselors in having these conversations as well. I also want to say, I think the partnership that we're having in other areas has been really strong. I just this morning signed the IGA about the immigration enforcement mitigation funds that Metro Council has dedicated $500,000 to all of the counties for that work to help with some of these impacts around housing that people are experiencing. For Multnomah County, that's $226,000 plus that we're going to be adding to some of the investment that this board has already made. And so that partnership and sharing of priorities is a really great example that I think that our communities can be proud of. I also, appreciated the going back to the goals of the measure, even though, this measure was really about permanent supportive housing, was really about how are we looking at what was happening at the time and how do we best respond to that, knowing that for many people experiencing chronic homelessness, permanent supportive housing is the answer, is the solution. And I just wanted to, but also, the disparate impacts, so we were saying for communities of color and that being a goal. I did want to lift up that the auditor just shared with the board that they're, as a part of the SHS performance audit that her office is doing, they are really going to be focusing on determining whether the permanent housing placement and supportive housing services are meeting the needs of priority populations. So we're continuing to delve into that, and I just want to appreciate the auditors. It's a key piece. So seeing that a lot of this work is being integrated into the housing work that Metro is doing is key. I know we have these conversations with the city of Portland all the time about the need for housing, of really getting the solution. So thank you for lifting up what's happening in Austin. So I just appreciate you being here. I did want to see, Anna, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to share or respond to as a result of the report from the Multnomah County perspective.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Gotcha. Sure. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Anna Plum, and I am the Interim Director for Multnomah County Homeless Services Department. I have one quick correction and then mostly a lot of thanks to share. So just a quick correction on the Multnomah County performance slide on the addition of supportive housing units. There was a little bit of it looks like there was a little admin mistracking on that, so just correcting that. Our goal was 401 for this year, and the performance was 244, so just slight difference on those numbers. The story is the same. That is the one annual goal we didn't meet, and Mike was correct. That's primarily having to do with delays in construction projects. We have 5 construction projects for new PSH that will come online this year. And then there was a slight delay, as you know, in our 200 voucher units that we're bringing online, but those are going to be starting the last quarter of this fiscal year. So same story, just quick for the record correction on the numbers.
Okay, great, thank you. And those are in our annual report?
Yes, so those are the annual goals. Yeah. Just to sort of say where we are with the 10-year goal, as of the timing of this annual report, we were at 69% of the 10-year annual goal, while about halfway through the measure, and then we're funded to be at 87% this fiscal year. Great. So just to give that context on those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
And then the only other thing I'd want to say is that we're really proud to have you all here presenting about our results. We're proud to show that we've met and exceeded all the other goals. It's a real testament to the power of these funds and the good that they're doing in the community. I want to thank the Metro staff and the Oversight Committee for their partnership and their leadership. I do also want to acknowledge the role of our contracted providers, who are the lifeblood of the work and who perform this transformation in the community. And then because I'm here, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of our SHS team at the Homeless Services Department. Some of them are in the room here today, and they do a ton of work behind the scenes to support the success of our program. So thank you to them, thank you to you, and thank you to all of you for your leadership as well.
Thank you, Anna, appreciate that. And then Commissioner Jones-Dixon, did you have one more comment?
Yeah, I was just that was going to be my comment. A huge thanks to the HSD team for your leadership and your partnership and under your direction as well, Director Plum. And then also that should have started there as far as we meeting the goals that have been set by the committee and everything, and that's indicative of just your leadership and the team's effort. So thank you again. And then on the challenger slide, you mentioned as it pertains to pathways and connection to services, you mentioned daycare. We have the Preschool for All program. So again, I think we have all the pieces to the puzzle. It's just a matter of connecting them, which you stated in your remarks. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, and I'm glad our team is here today and has received many well-deserved thanks for all of the work. And again, thank you, Yesenia, to you and your team for all of the work. And again, thank you both for your leadership on the Oversight Committee. It was great working with you on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Now I think we're ready to go on to R3.
R3, authorizing execution of intergovernmental agreement with City of Portland Auditor for Initiative Petition Processing Partnership.
May I have a motion? Commissioner Jones-Dixon moves, Commissioner Brim Edwards seconds, approval of R3. We have Tim Scott, Director of Multnomah County Elections, here to introduce this item. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Vega Peterson and members of the board. My name is Tim Scott, and I am the Director of Elections for Multnomah County. And I'm here today to ask you to authorize the execution of an intergovernmental agreement related to petition processing with the City of Portland. Periodically, the city gets more petitions than they can handle in their office. They have 2 that will likely be in the field all the way up until the end of June. And then by their rules, they have 30 days to process those petitions, and that includes the first part of processing, which is counting all the pages and making sure they're all numbered correctly, making sure they're signed by the petitioners, and kind of doing all that admin work up front. And then also, as a part of the 30 days, they have to turn it over to us to do the signature verification. So this agreement is really about the first part of that, the pre-processing, and it just allows us to enter into an agreement for each engagement as they come up over the next 5 years to kind of, we loan them space in our office and access to some of our skilled signature verification staff and other on-call staff, and then they pay us back. So it's budget neutral because we will be being reimbursed 100% by the City of Portland. And the way the IGA is set up is that we will agree to the terms of each engagement as we go along. So we'll set a not to exceed price for the reimbursement of primarily labor for on-call workers. And we've done this before. 2018 was the last time we actually brought an IGA in front of the board. But in the past, we'd only done them on a one-on-one, a one-time basis. We decided to be more efficient this time and create an agreement that would last for at least 5 years, or about 5 years, so that we don't have to come back every time to do this. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Tim. Did we have any public testimony on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll go to the board for any questions. Commissioner Brim Edwards, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Moyer, no questions? I don't have any questions either, just kudos for the work that our elections division does overall for the elections, helping out our partners across the river, I think is a good example of the cooperation that we have on this. And then also glad to hear that you're doing this in kind of a 5-year chunk so that this can go forward smoothly for upcoming elections as well. So thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.
Can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Moyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Brim Edwards?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jones-Dixon?
Yes.
Chair Vega Peterson?
Aye, the IGA is approved. All right.
R4, resolution adopting rules for board meetings and repealing Resolution 2013-021.
Great. So we're having Jenny Madcore come up from behind the desk to come down to the dais. This is a real important piece of work that I know our entire board has been really deeply engaged in on updating our board rules, which, as you can tell from the title of this, had not been done since 2013. So this is really about providing fairness, transparency, and clarity for our board meeting procedures. I want to thank Commissioner Jones-Dixon and Brendan Finn's office for all the work work in getting us this final stretch. I want to thank Commissioner Moyer and Reagan Gray and her office for all of the work that happened on this, as well as all of the offices that have participated. It was very detail-oriented work with lots of different steps. So I appreciate, Jenny, your work on this, all of the work from the county attorney's office to help us improve our policies. I also wanted to give a shout out to Jenny Smith, who was also really integral to the beginning of this process and kind of getting us across the finish line as well. So Commissioner Jones-Dixon, would you like to add anything before I turn it over to Jenny?
Yes, I have a 10-minute speech.
Excellent,
No, pretty much you said everything. So thank you, team. Also want to add shout out to my policy director, Ashley Graff, for being the glue as well as far as helping to pull everything together, and then the rest of the staff from our respective offices. And again, it's another step in the right direction as far as clarity and how we operate and move and work through the county's business and work. And thank you, per usual, City Attorney Matt Core, for your guidance and putting it to the right language. I'll hand it off to Commissioner Moyer, my colleague.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank Commissioner Jones-Dixon for working on this with me and our staffs for over a year. And I really appreciate this commission wanting to take on the super fun work of, the nuance of how we're going to operate and run ourselves. But I think it's also a really appropriate time in the context of what's going on nationally to engage in depth in how the democratic process works and to make sure that we are showing the public the degree to which we take our democratic role seriously and connecting it not only to our local history, but the framework in which we operate under the state and ultimately the U.S. Constitution, which I value more and more as I see things violating it. The more I'm like, oh, that really was a great principle. I wish we still did that. But this is a product of a lot of hands. And so I just want to thank everybody because it is meticulous to write rules and go back and forth and discuss them. And I am grateful because I think every office is represented in different components of this and brought really good perspective and ideas. And again, I think our county attorney, Jenny Madcore, and whomever on her team helped having to translate those ideas into operational language. And so I'm really, this is clearly a collaborative product, and I thank everybody who spent the time to make it possible.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll turn it over to you, Jenny. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Jenny Madcore, I'm your county attorney, and this is a collaborative document that we're talking about today. It's one that has had so many hands on it as we modeled, remodeled, heard, listened, incorporated, and then created a document that I think really captures both the letter and the spirit of this board and how you work together and your collaborative spirit. So I thank everybody and repeat those things. We have our document here. We talked about this in a few different other public meetings. I've had opportunities to talk to you individually and your staff, and all the changes that we have in here are really efforts to reflect the board's will. Now, we talked about it before. One of the beauties of this document is that we commit to looking at it every year towards the beginning of the year when new commissioners come on, and so that we can look at it, make sure these rules serve us, and if they don't, that's when we're going to make amendments and tweaks. This is a resolution. It's our document. Specifically, it's your document. And we'll be looking at it each year and updating as it goes. So I'm a little bit of a nerd. I love a rule, and these are rules, and so I'm happy to walk through I'm not a little bit of a nerd. I'm a lot of a nerd. That's okay. But I'm happy to walk through issues. I'm happy to answer questions. I just want to be here and available to help this process, and what we're looking for at the end of this is a yes vote so that we have our new board rules. And then next steps, we're going to have to implement these rules. There'll have to be some updates to our board materials. The the board clerk's role is changing a little bit. We have some new processes coming online. We'll need to update BCC1, which is an administrative procedure that goes down to the departments and how they update, so there's going to be work after this. It's not one and done, but this is our major step because it's the guiding principle. So questions, how can I best help you today going through this document? Or if you just want to vote yes,
Yes, so I'm hoping we're all going to vote yes, but I just wanted to check, did we have any public testimony on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, great. I'll just open it up for the board if there are any questions on this. We have had many, many, many discussions about this. I just want to commend you, Jenny, for the work in listening and integrating all of the comments and desires and priorities of this board and being able to really translate that into a workable document that you as our county attorney will be able to help us, and the board clerk as well will help us manage as we move forward with these board meetings. So just thank you for that. Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Broome Edwards.
Yeah, so I'm glad today the day is here. I've just a couple comments on some of the provisions, just more for the record versus not offering in amendments. But I'm just going to start by saying, when I first got on the commission, there was sort of this narrative, like, commissioners can't get things on the agenda. And I thought, well, that's strange, because, like, we're the policymaking body. We should have the ability to get things on the agenda. And one of the first things I asked was for our council to provide, like, what are the rules? Because that's always a good place to start. And you sent the 2013 list along with some other documents, and I read through it, and it's like, oh, right there it says that we can commissioners can add things to the agenda. And so we started adding things to the agenda, and I really appreciate we're having some clarity, because I think this will give everybody a roadmap of how they can effectively engage in the work that we were all elected to do. There was also, I will say, some confusion on, like, do we rely on Robert's Rules of Orders or something else? And so, we're very clear today that that's sort of the backstop, which is the backstop, I think, for most democratically elected legislative bodies, is so that people know the rules and what their rights are, whether they're in the majority or the minority. And so I think this will really improve and reduce frustrations, perhaps, by not just the elected commissioners, but also the other elected officials from Multnomah County, the auditor, the sheriff, and the district attorney. So hopefully they have a roadmap, too, about how they engage in our legislative process. I really want to send appreciation to Jenny Madcore, Jenny Smith, the two commission offices that took the lead on this. When I got here, having been involved in a lot of other legislative bodies, I was like, we need to have a whole governance package. So I put together a good governance package on accountability and transparency. It dealt with proclamations. I really appreciate the chair's office helping drive that to, I think, get us in a much better place of how we also work through the proclamation process. I think it works better for everybody. But the board rules were another piece. The lobbying ordinance was another. So I hope today, while this is, I think, primarily an internal-facing document for all of us of how we do our work and for our staff, I also think there are many elements of it that will be really helpful to the broader community who want to engage with us around our work, and here's how you can do it, and it's done in I think a transparent, sort of plain English way that is will make it, I think, up for a better process. So while rules can be somewhat dry, they are really what guide the work of policymaking bodies, and I'm also glad that we're going to the practice of adopting the rules every year. It's standard in the legislature. That's almost like always the first order of business. So like, what are the rules in which we're going to, or our guardrails that we're going to operate under? So I think that's another really important change, that we're not relying on something literally from more than a decade ago. So just thanks to my colleagues and all the staff who did work on this. So those are my comments. I have just a couple specific things I just wanted to raise as just points of just clarifications. And while we have said that we're going to readopt the rules every year, I think we should test drive these for a couple months and see if like, oh, we hadn't anticipated something, and be open enough that we have some flex. In section 2, there's something on the chair presenting a list of assignments that require a board approval. While it doesn't say this, there had been a practice where maybe in statute or in an intergovernmental agreement that the commission made appointments versus the chair recommending them. And I just want to clarify that actually in 2C contemplates that. It seems to be broad enough that, like, for example, we'll just take LPSC. Those are by statute appointed by the commission, that versus having the chair present the list, that we'd have a commission process.
Yeah, it does contemplate that, and I think that I'm hopeful that this language will be workable. It's actually broader than the previous rules were, because it really gives this opportunity on a yearly basis to discuss all of the boards and commissions in an open session, so there's value there. And then we had to keep the language broad because there's so many different committees and there's so many different ways that appointments happen, who does it. So we kept it broad, and we can look at it and see if it needs to be amended in the future if we find a little bump in the road.
Great, thanks for the affirmation. And then section 5B, agenda placement. So it has the chair, the commissioners, all the elected officials, and then it says, and then it lists the chief operating officers and department directors of being able to put things on the agenda item, on the agenda. And I'm just assuming as a matter of practice that, but you can tell me if I'm wrong, that the electeds would have some sort of priority in the, I mean, I understand that staff have things I want to get on the agenda, but also it's the only place where the commissioners can actually do their work. So that's going to be something that I guess I'll just want to watch to see. I would hate for, like, hey, that all the slots got filled up by staff and commissioners, even though that's the one place you can do your work, versus staff. We can only do our work as a public body in a public meeting. So I'm just concerned that the language doesn't actually have any sort of prioritization.
Well, one way that we attempted to address the needs of the board and the individual board members here is it's the same section 5, but then D, and that's a time certain matters. So in every board meeting, there will be 2 time certain matters that are reserved for this board. So that is going to be, that's a major tool and new that will help the board really prioritize its work. And then when we go over to how the board clerk is going to be scheduling matters, in section 5A sub 3, it lists how matters will be scheduled, and you'll see that time certain matters get almost top billing. It's consent agenda and then the time certain matters. So that's one way that we're attempting to address the needs of the board, and another thing we can continue to monitor.
And actually, that was the next thing I had flagged, just for clarification, because, and I raised this at the last meeting, and the language didn't necessarily change, but I raised it as a concern that, because it's a first come, first serve, and actually, so for sake of illustration, not with the commission, but say, because it says county elected officials, so say the DA, the auditor, the sheriff just decided, like, I'm going to every month use one of those time certains, and if I get mine in on first come, first serve basis, that they could be taking half the the time certains. So again, this is something that, I'd suggested, like, we have hey, you could have, if it's all the electeds, say 1/8 of the time certains, and when you get over the 1/8, if nobody else wants one of those time certains, you could use it, but I'm just.
And I did hear you on that, and we added language, Commissioner. So it says, no county elected official may reserve more than one time certain slot per meeting. So that's our first attempt at addressing that. And that might not be the right metric. We might want to change that over time, but that's the first go at it, just so that we don't have someone bogarting all those time certain slots.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And again, I'm not flagging it as like, I'm going to suggest language changes here, but it's just something I think we should take into consideration as we think about, how we might want to evolve them if there's a need to. But I want to flag that because you potentially could have a situation where the time certains all get taken. So the other section is this. In section 8 on voting, K, which is essentially giving the presiding officer the authority to change the order of the agenda items. And I raised this issue as somebody who sat in the audience sometimes to give public comment or to weigh in on an agenda item and have the agenda item changed, and it's like, oh, we don't, because people have childcare or work or a whole host of things, especially since we meet in the day, that people look at the agenda and make, plan when they're going to come. Most people don't come to stay for the entire meeting. And the one concern I have is, and again, I'm not going to propose any sort of change, but just, I guess, to ask the presiding officer that I'm thinking about if people, if it's something that there has been a demonstrated like community interest in coming in and weighing in or participating in the vote or being there for the vote, that we try and keep as close to the agenda timing as we can, because I think it builds trust and credibility when it's not, hey, you took time off work to come to give comment on something and you missed it because the order got changed without notice. So it's more just, and I think in our previous exchange you indicated, and we added in the public, but it was almost like the public's asking for it to be changed versus just knowing that there are people who might miss an opportunity to engage on an agenda item if the order is changed. And then I had a question. This is a question just for clarification on section 10, public testimony. And I think this is a carryover from our previous rules, but in 10A, it says that the presiding officer may limit appearances to presentations of relevant points. And my understanding from being on the school board is like people, if you have a public comment section, you can't regulate what they speak about. You may ask, you can ask them to stay to the topic, but you can't actually prevent them from talking on different topics on what this body might think is not a relevant topic.
Well, you would not be able to regulate their viewpoint, but to the extent that for the purposes of order, you're regulating it to, let's say, R1, and we're, building a new bridge. And if someone then wanted to talk about something completely unrelated to that topic, let's say, something at the federal government or whatnot, we could have regulation to the topic at hand for the purposes of order on agenda items. Non-agenda items, however, are up to what people want to talk about on the non-agenda, so long as it otherwise comports with our behavior rules.
So you're saying this rule would allow the chair, if somebody signed up for public comment on an agenda item, to not allow them to provide their public comment if they felt it was
the public comment should be related to the agenda item, and the presiding officer, who may be the chair, but it may be another member of the board, would then could take reasonable efforts to limit testimony to those relevant points, yes.
Reasonable efforts.
But, it's not going to be like, you agree with me or you don't agree with me. It's about the topic. So we can't regulate people's opinions on the topic, just that it is on topic, reasonably on topic.
And I will say, like, how this, like, in practical terms, how this normally shows up is just a reminder. Could you please keep your comments to the item at hand? That's how it's worked in my 10 years of being here, that's usually as far as it's ever gone.
Yeah.
Because I would say most people abide by that, right? I mean, we haven't had a problem with that.
Well, and this board provides testimony on non-agenda items, which is not a requirement of law. It's a thing that the board approves so that we can really hear from people on all sorts of topics and inform the board on areas of interest of the community.
Yeah. I just think the way it's worded, it seems to be worded more, maybe veering into the, a subjective, what's relevant? But it is the discretion of this presiding officer. It just looks to be worded in a way in which there's more discretion. And that's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Yeah, just on Section 10, just to, again, build off of your point as far as public testimony, I think about our budget, when we go through the process and we have public testimony and we only have like 2 hours for folks to come in or 3 hours for folks to come in. Last year, I noticed that there was just a handful of specific groups that, I'm not going to use the term took up the majority of the time, but as far as like equitably ensuring that folks have time to speak, I think this would be applicable, as far as Section 10, point A. Would it be? What are your guys's?
Are you talking about like when we had many people from the same organizations like signing up again and again, and sometimes that pushed other folks out?
Yeah.
I think that that's something that we can work with the board clerk on, trying to prioritize folks who we have not heard from before, to make sure that we're hearing from a broad, that we're hearing from a broad group of folks who want to talk about different things. Because I think this definitely shows up during the budget process.
Yeah. And then lastly, just another round of thank yous again for taking everything that we've talked about over the last year and putting it into this document. I'm supportive of how it's written. And another shout out to Chief, my Chief, and then Chief Jenny Smith as well, and Chief Reagan for their work as far as bringing everything together. And then also former Auditor Mary Hull Cabarero as far as taking the first stab at getting our thoughts on paper. So it's a good start and supportive, and grateful that we'll review this every year. So thank you again.
Thank you. Commissioner Moyer, any comments? Any more comments?
Yeah, some of the things that I think are an experiment for us, I'm really hopeful and optimistic about, is the time certain agenda slots, which I hope allow us to plan our work as a body and also give the community greater access. I think there's a lot in here that is a move toward greater transparency for the public that I think is great. I think we had talked about it. This happens to be where some of that shows up. Some other things we've adopted have also done that. But it is a living document, and I think we're going to see what trips us up. We're going to be trying new things, and I am a strong believer that rules are our social contract with each other on how we operate, and it is completely fine to decide we want to modify that, and then future boards deciding that something else works better for them, and I think that's healthy and an important process that we're going to engage ourselves in annually, and as will future boards with different approaches that work for them. So thank you, and I thank everybody for the time that has been spent on this.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you again, Jenny. I will just talk about a little bit about next steps before we have our vote. So if this resolution passes today, the board clerk, the county attorney's office, myself as the chair, Vice Chair Jones Dixon, and our chiefs of staff are going to meet to discuss the operational impacts and the next steps to actualize these new rules. There's going to be, a little bit of process change and things, so we want to make sure that we are getting to work on that so that we can have these in effect as soon as possible. That group will develop a communication to share with the board, with department directors and others to guide the changes to board meetings and materials in particular. That's going to include updating our online guidance, the deadline chart, and relevant associated documents. So we want to make sure that we're really clear and transparent and people have an understanding of what the impacts of these new rules will be on how we go about our business. And then, as I mentioned, the new deadlines are going to be in effect as soon as practicable with a complete implementation in the coming months. And so again, we want to be clearly communicating the expectations when we have some more certainty around those dates. So I appreciate grace with everyone as we catch up with these workflows with the new timings that we have there, and we want to make sure that that's moving forward well. I will say that I think this step today builds on some of the work that this board has already taken that's already been shown to, I think, help with our time management and the way these meetings run. I would point to the proclamation ceremony as a big part of that. I think having the clarity in the process of when things are due and how things are need to be submitted has been really good. And I think that Commissioner Brim-Edwards, I love that you, the first thing you did when you heard a narrative about getting things on the agenda was to actually read the rules and find out how that works, because I think that is a really important step that may have been missed. And then I finally wanted to just also give a shout out to Mary Hall Caballero, who really helped us in outlining some of these things, and I think some of the work that we see reflected in this. So just appreciate this, everybody working to this, and I'm glad we are at this point today. So Emily, can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Moyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Brim-Edwards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones Dixon?
Yes.
Chair Vega Peterson?
Aye. The resolution is adopted. All right, now is when we have time for board comments on non-agenda items. I'm going to open it up to commissioners to see who has anything to share. And anyone have comments today? Commissioner Jones Dixon.
Yeah, just wanted to, this weekend, the Crown Point Museum is opening, Historic Museum is opening out in Corbett. So the Chief and I were going to be out there for that. We're beyond excited. And then also just wanted to take a moment to just thank our amazing staff, from Chief Neal to our CFO, Eric Ariano, Corey Bell, everyone, Tracy Massey. It's been over the last 3 weeks, or actually since day one, my office always sends them just inquiries from the community. You're always responsive, and just a level of professionalism. Just want to recognize that and just say thank you again for your service. And I've been hearing direct feedback from community leaders as well, as far as how blown away that they are just by the level of service and the responsiveness and just how we're working together to move our county forward. So just want to say thank you to you all. And we hear snaps from the back from Chief. So job well done. And I'll just leave it at that for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to address a comment that our president chose to make this week, which I found profoundly offensive, which was in reference to apparently President of the United States, Gavin Newsom, was unaware that he had been elected president, but who I think is our president, I'm not sure he realizes it, Donald Trump, said that Gavin Newsom was not qualified to be president of the United States because he has dyslexia, and that makes him stupid. That is wrong on so many levels. I don't even know where to begin. Most of the time, I would not bother, frankly, to respond to profoundly ignorant comments. But I did feel sad for young people who were like me, who didn't have it easy in school and sometimes felt like they couldn't do things. That having the President of the United States imply having a learning disability would make you categorically unqualified is not only incredibly inaccurate and biased, but it actually does not reflect U.S. history. As George Washington was dyslexic, JFK was dyslexic, Albert Einstein was dyslexic, General Patton was dyslexic. The laundry list of Winston Churchill was dyslexic. The laundry list of exceptional leaders who happen to have dyslexia or other learning disabilities is incredibly long. There are some reasons that people with dyslexia might, in fact, make better president, certainly than our current one, is due to learning differently, creates new perspectives, and that is a blessing to any group to have people who think differently and see the world from different perspectives. So I take this moment, not, for the 3 people listening, that I hope that young people who are struggling with a learning disability, because it does mean that the way the world has organized itself to teach people isn't a great fit for a lot of kids. And it can mean things are harder and that they don't see the success in a classroom the same way as some of their peers, that it is not at all a reflection of what you are capable of, and in fact, can be your superpower. I did appreciate and share the view of Gavin Newsom that being dyslexic has, although challenging in both our childhoods and our adulthoods, you don't grow out of a learning disability, you simply adapt. It has actually been a profound gift because I am incredibly grateful for the way that I view the world, but also the challenges I've had have made me a more understanding and empathetic human being, of which I think this current president would have benefited from. So I leave it at wanting everybody to be armed with some comebacks about, in fact, we have had some excellent world leaders and thinkers who are dyslexic. This is not an endorsement for Gavin Newsom in any future election or not, just wanted to comment on behalf of the learning disabled of the world. We are fully capable people.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Moyer. And when you said there was something that the president said last week that that upset you, I was like, well, which thing? Which thing? So, Commissioner Burnham-Edwards.
Thanks. Thanks for your comment, Commissioner Moyer. So I just wanted to raise the issue that I raised the other day in the city, the joint City of Portland, Multnomah County Commission meeting about shelter, in addition to what the department has put forward as a proposed reduction in shelter, which is a massive reduction. That the news this week that was unexpected, or last week, that was unexpected from Sunstone, another provider that provides shelter for both the county and the city, that they were going to be ceasing operations at June 30th, has created a massive amount of uncertainty because it's not just one shelter or a small number of people. I mean, it collectively adds up to almost 1,000 shelter beds. And while we were reassured that the city and the county, City of Portland and the county staff were, actively talking every day, the plans or just the structure of how we're going to think about what could potentially be a massive change, none of it's visible to either the commission, the people who utilize, stay at the shelters, or the shelter staff, or the organizations that are going to be impacted, who might have, hundreds of their shelter beds impacted. So I would hope that before April 16th, I expect to have something on as a commissioner, something on Sunzone, like what are the plans? So we now know that they're shutting down, but what are the plans, or what's the path, or what's the structure of how the decision-making will happen, so that we could not only answer questions, but also where they impact our districts, or people who are in our districts, that we have the ability to be participants, active participants in the discussion. And I would ask that that happens sooner rather than later. It's the request I made yesterday, but hope that that happens soon.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will say, I know that my staff let your staff know on Monday that by the end of this week, there will be an update on this. I will say, for somebody who has served on boards of different nonprofit organizations, the decision to shut the doors of an organization immediately is an incredibly almost bizarre one. I mean, to do it so quickly without notice or conversation or transition. So I want to thank Anna, who's no longer in the room, and all of our partners at the city for really working quickly and thoroughly to really understand both the impact and have a plan in place, because this creates uncertainty for the people who are being served there, for the staff, and for us as partners and funders of the work that's happening there. So yes, please. I mean, we got the news exactly a week ago, and so there'll be an update coming to the board this week.
So the other thing that, thank you. Since we're almost near to the end of the week, I know that's about ready to happen. So the other thing that I think is important, in addition to the staff, the people who are served, is also from a taxpayer standpoint. So the provider that shut down was also the subject of a 2022 audit hotline report that they had submitted non-allowable expenses. So it appears that potentially we have a repeat of the behavior, and the question is sort of what is the accountability that for the tax dollars? Has the money, have they already gotten all the resources for the end of the year? Have they returned the funds that they potentially submitted for reimbursement that are not allowable? I mean, I would expect an accounting of that as well. Again, just for us to be doing our fiduciary responsibility, to know that if a contractor submitted non-allowable expenses, especially when it's not the first time they've done that what is the county's recourse, and that we're not just, oh, well, they're going out of, going to cease in existence. And I think we owe that to the broader community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Commissioner Jones-Hickson, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just one other comment. The East Multnomah County Transportation Committee, we had a meeting on Monday, and we're restructuring our how we conduct the meetings and how we just the work in general. So I just want to say thank you to the DCS office, so Sarah, Director Bradway, and then also Allison and Tom, who facilitated a great meeting around just the future and how we function in general. So
great. Thank you for sharing that. I have two announcements. So first of all, I just want to say Eid Mubarak to all employees and community members who celebrate this joyous holiday, which marks the end of Ramadan. I am wishing everyone a wonderful celebration filled with love, prosperity, and a renewal of energy and optimism. I also wanted to just comment on the news around Cesar Chavez. I was devastated, really, to hear the news. My mom, my sisters, my family, we had a text going back and forth all day yesterday about what this means, the impact to us, to our community. And my thoughts are with the women he assaulted, including the indelible Dolores Huerta. I have had the honor to meet with, to speak with, to hear from Dolores Huerta several times. Then, as now, she reminds us of the power of our voices and our collective impact. Social justice movements are always bigger than one person, and I think that's really important to remember and to uplift right now. And in fact, their success rests on the shoulders of countless women like Dolores. These women, the sacrifices they made and the struggles that they had to endure are the ones who deserve our gratitude and our recognition. I have been in contact with Councilor Candace Avalos around the desire to rename Cesar Y. Chavez Boulevard for Dolores Huerta. I support a public process for this around a name change, but personally, I want us to honor this incredible leader and recognize her accomplishments and impact in that way. So I just wanted to mention that because I know this is having a big impact on our community, especially the Latina community. So thank you, everyone. That concludes today's regular board meeting. There being no further business, we are adjourned.